We have one author in the studio who has produced a lot of translations of the work, and he has also some books to his name. We are very glad that we have been joined by Mr. Arshad Waheed. He happens to be a poet and also a novelist. So, Assalamu alaikum, sir, and thank you so much for coming to our show. So, Arshad Saab, so you have a book with the name The Other Days, right? This is the book, and we are very glad that you have authored this book. So, would you like to contemplate upon the broader themes which revolve, and what are the sub-themes which revolve in this book?
I think its main theme is human liberation, while it has to deal with the social constructs and social oppression driven by various ideologies and the way people live, and they want others to live in the same way. So, this is its main theme, and it deals with the generation who was young in 60s and 70s.
Yes.
They had dreams, they want to transform the society, they wanted to have a better world for themselves and for their children. And they struggled, and somehow then they got disintegrated, they left the country, they struggled in other countries to find their own way, and after maybe 2 or 3 decades, they came back to this country, to their homeland, and they found it quite a different society from what they had already left behind. So, it deals with the themes of migration, identity, relationship between men and women, social constructs which oppress individuals to refrain from what they think is their way of life.
Right.
So, this is a whole transformation of like 20-30 years,
okay,
from starting from 60s and 70s and coming back to the turn of the century, early 21st century.
Yes, and so you've particularly focused on the 60s and 70s, the era of 60s and 70s, and as I can recall, it's a very exciting era because there's so many competing ideologies that are competing in the ideas of public affair. So you have the manifestation of the liberalism, you have capitalism, then you have socialism, then you have civil rights movements going on, feminism. There were different waves of feminism. Feminists were protesting, civil rights movements were protesting. So why is there particular emphasis on the 60s and 70s, and obviously Pakistan was not immune from all of this ideology, diffusion of this ideology, and what is the general summary or the plot line of this particular book?
You are very right. I mean, 60s and 70s, it was a global,
yes,
there were trends at a global level.
Yes.
There were national liberation movements, there were human rights movements, and a lot of things were being transformed, and
yes,
people wanted to transform it differently. So, Pakistan, as you said, it was not immune to this trend at all. We can see that it was a very lively period,
yes,
in particularly in university campuses, which
yes,
this novel focuses on.
yes, yes.
They were, I mean, someone would say that East is red or East is green or whatever. So, they wanted to change very honestly,
right,
to transform the society, what they thought would be good for, I mean, there would be social justice, there would be economic justice,
wonderful,
right, and there would be rights of the people
yes,
without any discrimination,
yes,
on the basis of gender, race, but things didn't turn like that,
right,
and there were changes in Pakistan,
yes,
there were dictatorial rules in Pakistan, which almost didn't let that political culture flourish. And then a new generation came in, which was mostly inspired by global movements of fundamentalism or anti-fundamentalism. And these characters of these novels, their own children are affected by that. And that is the whole story, that is the conflict,
right,
between the two generations actually, which are unable to see the world with a common lens.
right,
They have very different lens to see the world. So, that deals, I mean, intergenerational issues this
okay,
novel deals with.
okay,
It deals with the issues of human liberation,
right,
and what the social pressures are, social constructs driven by various ideologies,
right,
want people to act
right,
in their what they think is correct or not correct.
Yes, so you, we were having a very interesting conversation before the red light of the camera went on, and you alluded to a term called, fundamentalism, and obviously this has been a term which is very well known, especially in the aftermath of the 9/11, and the kind of impact that term had on our societies, particularly in Pakistan. So, and we see this trend. I would like to allude to the Pakistani authors who wrote a lot of English fiction. So, for example, Kamila Shamsi, Mohsen Hamid, and others, the reluctant fundamentalists, other authors. So, there was this particular trend which I found in those books was that they were capitalizing on polarization, on the fragmentation of the society, and it was divided on a very religious lines, and that is the sort of the project that would go out, especially they would tap into the Western audiences, right? And I believe Pakistan is much more than that. Pakistan has such a huge flourishing literary tradition. Its cultural norms are so wide, so diverse across the, if you analyze the Indus Valley. So, and I feel that there's a huge responsibility, especially on the people who are English writers, who are writing from the lens of Pakistani society. So, why did we find those lenses? And now, since that securitization lens is being broken post 9/11, we see some really interesting flourishing of the literary tradition in Pakistani landscape, right? So, what are what sort of books would you recommend to people out there who love reading out there, especially for the fiction readers?
Well, coming back to your comments, I totally agree with
Yes.
you. Pakistan is much more than, but of course it has been affected by these trends.
Of course.
And in my novel, local storytelling traditions are also, referred to in my story. Story of Heer Ranja is the basic life motif which recurs in its story time and again.
Yes.
And it tells the struggle of women against social oppression.
Right.
And that is then reflected in political discussion, political discourse, political struggle and social struggle. And the predicament of family relationships and individual choices. So, all these things reflect in this story. It's not totally a fundamentalism or indifferent. That is just a reference.
Okay.
And that coming back to your second question, what I would recommend for readers. Well, I'm nobody to recommend anything to any. It's people's choices, but I would like them to read, if possible, if they have time. Particularly younger generation, if they have time and interest, they should write great literary novelists and writers who have tried to understand human beings, try to understand human societies through storytelling.
Yes.
Storytelling does not claim on any universal reality, but it illuminates certain aspects of human individuals and human societies.
Yes.
So, they do not give concrete answers, but they inspire you to have questions and to find their own answers.
Yes. So for example, some
Well,
which have inspired you.
Okay, maybe young writers even don't know these writers, but
Sure, go ahead.
I feel totally stranger to. Currently contemporary, I am very much impressed by Milan Kundera.
Okay.
His novels, his techniques, his themes he deals with. That's great. Jose Saramago, who wrote Blindness,
Right.
and Coetzee, who wrote Disgrace.
Right.
And in older, classical, we can say classical, Tolstoy and Dostoevsky, Kafka, they were great writers.
Especially that huge volume book in which he entirely describes how the destruction of Moscow takes place. It's a very fascinating read, especially for those who are interested in the classical literature and especially Russian literature. So now moving on, so you also have a hobby and a habit of translating a lot of Western fiction into the Urdu language, right? And you particularly focus on Garcia Marquez novels. So why particularly this author? Why not someone else? So is there a proper thought process behind it, or it was just a random selection of it?
Well, it was not random. I actually translated Garcia Marquez and Kundera both of them. Garcia Marquez translation was my first translation.
Okay, wonderful.
I think it was just I was overwhelmed and fascinated by the way he was telling the story,
Yes.
the way he was unfolding the events. It was just mesmerizing for me.
Yes.
I enjoyed it and I learnt a lot of things, I mean insights into human behavior as well. And then I immediately thought I must translate it. I mean
Wonderful.
it was like this, it was not
Yes.
random,
Yes.
but actually there are a lot of great pieces of art and work, I mean around,
Right.
but when I read it I couldn't hold myself and I just wanted to translate that.
Wonderful. Arshad Saab, we have seen that there was this trend in subcontinent of dastan goi or the oral storytelling, right? And I feel that the lot of history of the Eastern societies is lot oral, right? It's not that much written. So, and the Western is usually a written. I mean, you would find a lot of novels which were written in that. So dastan goi focuses a lot on the Sufi tales of the wisdom, and obviously they were very heroic tales of Islamic heroes who I mean fought, or that they were filled with lot of wisdom. But now we see that tradition, we are losing that tradition, and it almost dead because no one does the dastan goi as they used to do back in the days, especially in the courts of the kings, in the courts of the Mughals, or in the Persian courts, right? And being a teacher myself, so I was teaching digital storytelling, and this was my first lecture about the dastan goi. And Qissa Khwani Bazaar in Peshawar is famous for that because people used to tell stories in that particular area of dastan goi and whatnot. And then there is a lot of hegemony of the West, right? Especially in terms of the knowledge production. So we would see that their ideas, they have very flourishing. And how do you see the comparison between the writers of the first world countries and the writers who are coming from the global south? So what are the main themes that you find which are very different in those two demarcations in the first place?
Well, you have put 3 or 4 questions and it may take some time. I would like to talk briefly on that. Yeah, Qissa Goi and Dastan Goi was a tradition, and it was not only in the courts or in front of the kings, it was with the public as well.
Yes.
I mean, you might have heard the overnight recitation of Heer Ranja or Mirza Sahaba in villages, and there were a lot of groups which used to recite these things and explain it to the public.
Yes.
And same, I mean, but things transform, things change.
Of course.
Now there might not be many opportunities for them to go, and there is a lot of time available to the people sitting in front of dastan go and listening to him.
Yes.
So then they take different forms and different shapes in storytelling in a written form. You may find a narrator in a story who is actually doing the work of dastan go, who is doing a dastan goi. The narrator is telling the stories of he or she may talk of multiple perspectives in the story. So, I mean, the trend or the technique of dastan goi, it may be oral and it may be written. It is still going on. As you say that Western ideas and our ideas, I think we must not create boundaries in so-called Western and our ideas. We are human beings. We go through common experiences. We have a lot of common challenges. So, it's a process of mutual learning. We learn from them and they might learn from us as well. And it happens. So, we should encourage more and more the opportunities in which they interact, they exchange their opinions and ideas. There is a dialogue between the two on the themes and the techniques of storytelling. All these things should be discussed. So, I do not believe in separating the Western and our ideas. We human beings live on this planet. We have differences. We may have diversities. We have our own cultures, but that is not something which should hold truth forever. I mean, cultures transform, language transforms, we transform, our ways of lives transform, and it is all because of interaction between different societies and culture. So, we should not be insecure
Yes, that's very true. But obviously, when someone else is writing about you, so that person might have a different frame of reference through which he writes. But now moving on to our other conversation. So let's discuss young writers, and I mean in the era of Chat GPT, when you type anything and it would give you very comprehensive sort of an answer. So what does Chat GPT means for the young writers who are interested in writing? And obviously it's a very picture saturated century, right? So we see Instagram, it's all pictures, Snapchat, it's all pictures, TikTok, all pictures, and a lot of people are predicting the death of the book in this century. Do you believe in this assertion in the first place?
I don't know. I mean, very honestly, as far as you have referred to Chat GPT and other things, I have not actually tried it. I don't.
Really?
I have heard of it, but I have not tried it. The thing is, as I earlier said, literature actually gives you questions and some aspects. The things can be like this. It does not give absolute answers. So Chat GPT perhaps gives you very. It gives you conclusions. I don't know if it can write fiction as well. I am not aware of that. Number one.
Right.
Number two, even in the beginning, human communication was perhaps through pictures. If you see that,
yes.
so
yes.
maybe we are going back to that. If you say that children are picture centric, I don't know. It's difficult for me to understand and comprehend what our young children are thinking, because maybe I think they are trained in a very different way.
Right.
We have different imagination, so they will find their way and they will tell us what they would do.
Right.
And they, we should not be that much disappointed, but let their own understanding of the world. They would tell us what they want to do. Maybe we can just think that as long as we are alive, this storytelling is alive, this book culture is alive. It may die in maybe next 10, 15, 20 years.
Yes. So Arshad Saab, we've seen this trend, particularly I think in the past few days. Roald Dahl has been in the news posthumously, because there was this trend which was introduced by the Puffin, which is a huge book publisher in the West, and they were rewriting a lot of his novels because they find that it was not appropriate, right? So there's this movement in the literature about the cancel culture, where a lot of his words were changed. So I remember in his novel of Matilda, so there was Mr. Trunchbull, she was a very fat lady, so the fat has been eliminated, the word fat has been eliminated and replaced by something else. And then the Oompa Loompas, I do remember, they were small creatures, they are gender neutral. So do you agree with this assertion or this movement in particular, in which they are changing the words, they are rewriting the history just because it was not appropriate in this time? Do you think that that's I mean, authoritarian approach in the literature which has seeped in? What is your opinion about it?
Well, I don't agree with that.
Yes.
Because I think who is anyone to decide what is right or what is not right, or who is deciding what is appropriate or what is inappropriate. Kundera in one of his works writes that in coming, I mean, power determines it. No? So in coming times, technology and all these things would be more powerful, and they would decide about us.
Yes.
So, but he says that I can't give this right to more powerful technology to decide about me or other artists.
Wonderful.
Number one. So I agree to that. And secondly, literature or art is about, I mean, it creates something in a certain context. It may be universal, but it may go beyond time limitations.
Yes.
But it is basically something which inspires you to have certain questions or re-evaluating things.
Right.
Not that you are given, you have to be slaved by given ideas by someone else.
Yes.
So this is again against the concept of creation of art.
Yes. Yes.
So if it is done like this, I think that is the death of art. That's not death of book only.
Yes.
So-
Yes. So the one last question before we wrap up this segment. So we've seen that there's a lot of appropriation or the concept of doors, doorways or portals. For example, in Harry Potter, there was particular door through which he could pass away. And then in the modern also writing, and especially in the depiction of the fiction dramas, we've seen that there are portals opening up and people can move to another realm, to another world out there, to another universe out there. So do you believe that we humans have this capacity or capability that we will open up borderless sort of an areas where we could freely move and we can overpower hatred with the love? Do you think that that sort of doorless world is possible in the first place?
Well, that may be human desire, and it might be, it might come true. I don't know.
Yes.
But this is literature and art does create a different realm, different universe.
Yes.
I mean, it tells you.
Metaphorically, yeah.
Yeah, and it also is, it's a technique to tell truth in a different way.
Yes.
I mean, it doesn't have to reproduce what's actually happening.
Yes.
It has to be given different shades and techniques and. Okay.
Right.
So that may be human dream.
Right.
It may be possible. It may not be. I don't know.
Right, right. Thank you so much, Arshad Saab, for this wonderful cross-pollination of ideas about the humans, about the literature and the fiction out there. And this topic fascinates me a lot. Thank you so much for coming here, and thank you so much for bringing your wonderful book. I'll definitely give it a read. And those who are big book readers, please do give it a read and let us know what do you think about this book.